Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I grew up in a black church. I always got to hear somebody say something. No, I'm in the right place. And I'm happy that the something I got to hear is from my dear friend, Carol Fowler. Really incredibly grateful for your incredible chair, not only for her leadership, but for that fried fish that I asked her for that I hear is here. Oh, is here. All right, I had to make sure. But I also want to thank, and I know he's already been acknowledged, my forever chair and Chair Jamie Harrison. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your example. And thank you for your willingness to always speak truth to power, whether people want to hear it or not. And often they do not, Mr. Chairman. So thank you. But my fellow Democrats, I'm actually here tonight to talk about something pretty serious. To talk about peril and possibility. Peril and possibility. America, as we often find ourselves, we are at a crossroads, aren't we? Where the dangers are real, but so are the opportunities. There is a reason that a part of the playbook of tyrants is to go after history first. And the reason they do that is because they want you to forget what you are made of. They want you to forget the generations of people that organize marches and sit-ins and buses, not because they knew the outcome, but because they knew they had something that was worth fighting for. So I want to speak to you about that peril and possibility and about the threats that we face, but also about the promises that we carry. Because understanding both is key in this moment. History teaches us, and my faith reminds me, that weeping is going to endure for a night. You may have heard that. But that joy in the dawn always follows. Our nation and our families have been tested by fire and by fury. Yet we have always emerged stronger. We fought a civil war on this very soil and rebuilt. We faced down a Great Depression and out of its ruins built Social Security. And in the years that follow, we built programs called Medicare and Medicaid. And I want to be very clear, Democrats did that. We confronted segregation in all of its terror, and in response, we passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and we bent the arc of history more toward justice. Yes, sir. And at every turn, when America has been pushed to the brink, it is the courage of ordinary people. And let me make no bones about it, ordinary black people often is the case, who call us to not only rescue our democracy, but who continue to be the conscience of this nation. Peril and possibility. They have always been the twin forces in our story, and we are called yet again to make a choice between them. Today, the peril confronting our democracy, unfortunately, we got to see that guy every day. We see it in the rise of demagogues, not just here, but abroad, who are engaging in the same hateful ideologies and tropes that we have seen. And we certainly see it in Donald Trump. A small man who tries to be big by trying to pretend to be a tyrant and a king. We see it in this guy in the White House who is a weak man, to be clear, who fans the flames of division and hatred because he has no solutions to the problems that people are actually facing. We see in Donald Trump a cruel man. And unfortunately for us, his cruelty is often in competition with his incompetence. And often, his incompetence wins out. And sadly, he couldn't be trusted to do his job by himself, and so the powers that be gave him a manager in Elon Musk, who spends every single day trying to tear down our government, burn it to the studs, so that he can buy the ashes. Wow. And on social media and beyond, he amplifies the most extreme voices and does everything he can to silence the dissent. But we ought to be crystal clear about this. In South Carolina, you understand this very well. The extremism that we are fighting is not limited to Washington, D.C.
That's right.
In fact, when you ask Democrats, how did we get here? We didn't get here just because we lost a close election. We got here because we forgot where the power actually comes from.
That's right.
Locally, where you live.
That's right.
I like to remind folks that it wasn't in D.C. that they gerrymandered your congressional maps. That happens where you live.
All right.
It wasn't at the Department of Education that they're trying to shut down, that they were banning the books. That happened at your school board meeting where your kids go to school. It's not at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's where you live that folks refuse to do the things that we need to do to build more affordable housing. So we ought to be crystal clear about the work that we have. And as a party, we ought to be crystal clear that we don't exist just to elect a president every 4 years. Now, these forces that you know, they do want to drag us backwards. But it is critical that we recognize that we have seen men like this before.
Yes.
Some of you are young enough to remember Joseph McCarthy and the way he terrorized innocent Americans. You might remember this. You might have read about this. Some of you know about George Wallace, who stood at the schoolhouse doors and said segregation forever. You may have heard about him.
Yes, sir.
Some of you know that trafficking in this type of playbook is as old as civilization. And so I want to make no mistake that as dangerous as Donald Trump is, he is not unique.
Right.
Time and time again, they try to make us think that folks like this are unbeatable. But make no mistake, we are stronger than they have ever been. But Toni Morrison helped us understand a bit of the playbook. She's warned us, and I'm quoting her here, that the function, she said, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps us from doing our work. It keeps us from having to explain over and over and over our reason for being. And now they've found some other groups that they want to try to get you to focus on. I want to be very, very clear on this point. There are fewer trans athletes than Donald Trump has convictions. And so instead of solving our real problems, they want us drowning in manufactured controversies and crises that they make up and then come in and pretend to solve. They try to divide us up by race, by class, by faith, by who we love. They want rural Americans afraid of folks who live in the city. They want folks in the city afraid of people who live in rural communities. And I will tell you, as somebody who spends a lot of time in rural areas, it gets said to me a lot Malcolm, you going where? You gonna be all right? And then if I'm a little late to an event in the rural area, they like, you made it out of Philadelphia alive? I heard everything was on fire. You safe? But here is the truth. They want to tell working folks that you ought to be blaming immigrants for low wages while the CEOs pad their pockets. They want poor white folks and poor black folks to see each other as enemies while we ignore the people that are actually rigging the system against all of us. And so every day there's another scandal, there's another outrage, there's another violation of human rights, of basic norms, of basic dignity, of common sense. And they want to wear us down. And they want us to get to this place where we just start to accept stuff that Lord knows is unacceptable. Now, I don't know about you, but I have made a decision that I am not accepting what is seemingly cannot be changed. I am changing the things that we cannot accept. And so in this moment, they want us to feel powerless. They want people to wear these hats as billboards and put up a bunch of signs to make you think that they have more power than they have. And they want to try to confuse you with simple promises to big solutions like make America great again. And just like I said, this guy is not new. We have even heard that slogan before. He could even come up with his own slogan. That was something that Ronald Reagan came up with in the 80s. And folks have echoed it since. But I've still been asking all these years, when exactly were we great again? Back to what are we trying to get? Back to when millions of Americans were excluded from the greatness? That's what we're looking for. Make America Great Again is a recycled line from a recycled man with recycled ideas. But let me be clear about what Democrats are about. Democrats believe that America isn't made great by letting Wall Street write its own rules and screw over working people and working families. But I would ask you, this is up to you, South Carolina, do you think that it makes us great when we fire food safety inspectors that make sure you aren't poisoning your kids when you sit them down for dinner? Does that make us great? Does it make us great when we gut FEMA and disaster relief so that when the hurricanes and the floods hit your communities, folks are left begging for help? Does that make us great, Democrats? Does it make us great when we end Social Security and Medicare that you pay for? Does that make us great? No. Does it make us great when we ban books and censor history because they cannot handle the truth? Does that make us great? No. Does it make us great when we cut taxes for billionaires and big corporations and then say we can't afford to pay our teachers and fix our roads and fund all the services that folks deserve in their communities? Does that make us great? No. I didn't think so. We have a promise for this country. A promise that government needs to spend every single day paying on and trying to produce. So as I have said, yes, we face peril fueled by lies and nonsense and people in back rooms and in boardrooms. But the question is, what do you do in the face of that peril? What do you do when that despair is not irrational? That despair is driven by what you see on your phones in your neighborhoods. What do you do when you're starting to get a little weary and well-doing? When confronted by danger, there are great psychologists who have looked at how animals and how people respond. And so you have heard this before, that there are three basic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. And I think in our party, if I can be honest, that's the debate we're having. And I want to be crystal clear that I am on team fight like hell. Right now, there are voices inside and outside of our party who are telling us to lower our sights. There are folks who say, maybe we should just play it safe. Maybe we play dead. Maybe we appease the bigots and the dictators. There are folks who suggest that maybe if we just turn our backs on some of our neighbors, just the ones who are the smallest group, if we temper our tone, if we retreat from the battlefield, that somehow we can save ourselves from trouble. There are some that counsel if we just freeze in place, do nothing, flee from the big fights, that somehow the storm will pass. That's what they tell us. But my friends, you cannot reason with a tornado, and you cannot appease a tyrant. Silence in the face of extremism is moral surrender. Dr. King said it very, very clear when he taught us that to be neutral in situations of injustice is to be on the side of the oppressor. I refuse to be neutral on a moving train. Standing still is not an option when our values and our neighbors are under attack. So to those voices of doubt, I tell you this: we must fight. Not with fury and hatred, but we must fight with love. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, but if you do not own this book, you go buy this book, and don't buy it from Amazon. Buy it from a local bookstore. Bell Hooks has a book that's called All About Love. That book, along with the best book, has guided everything I have ever done. Because in this moment, Democrats, when we're facing this peril, we ought to also be very clear about what we are fighting for. I did not become a Democrat because I hate Donald Trump, to be clear. When I got registered as a Democrat, all I knew about Donald Trump was that he had a cameo in Home Alone 2. That's all I knew about this guy. I became a Democrat because there was somebody in my community that I loved, that I thought was worth fighting for. And a strong, fearless Democratic Party is the only hope for working people and working families who just want to live with dignity and decency. That is the only hope for our families. And so we fight with our organizing and our truth-telling. We fight by marching in the streets. We fight at the ballot box by turning out in record numbers. We fight in the halls of power, guided by our principles. We fight because we know what's at stake. I grew up in a working poor family in North Philly. My dad was trained as a social worker right at Temple University. And he was lucky enough that one day he met a cute little thing named Kelly, my mama. Now, I will tell you, I got the best parents in the world, second only to yours, who I assume were fantastic. But as great as my parents were, hitting the parental jackpot, they hated each other. And so what that meant for me is I lived 5 or 6 different places by the time I graduated high school. I got my first job at the age of 12, washing dishes at a little vegan soul food restaurant, if you can believe it or not. And what that job did was to give my mama just a little bit of wiggle room. Some of you know about needing wiggle room. Some of you know, like my family knew, about going to the clinic around the corner and signing up for a little program called CHIP. That's how I had health care. Some of you know about needing access to a housing voucher or to affordable housing. Some of you might know about that. Some of you may be aware of what it means to be in the grocery store, filling up that cart with great hopes and expectations till you get to the register. And then stuff starts coming out of the cart. And I will say as an aside, Madam Chair, that when stuff started coming out, my mom would always start taking out the stuff that I put in there first, which I didn't think was right. But as Democrats, what we're fighting for is really basic. People say, what's the Democratic message? It's pretty basic stuff. As Democrats, we believe that every single one of us ought to be able to have one good family-sustaining job. One job, not 2 and 3 and 4 jobs. That job ought to put you in a position to care for your kids, maybe afford to go on a vacation once a year. That job ought to afford you the opportunity to own a home and begin to build some generational wealth in a neighborhood that is safe. We believe that if you get sick, you ought to be able to go to the doctor. And I don't know, this is a big idea, but I think you ought to be able to afford the prescription when you leave the appointment. And that you get to watch your kids leave that home in that safe neighborhood that you can afford and go to a good, fully funded public school.
Right.
And that school ought to position your kids to also get a family-sustaining job and begin it all over again. And that if you're lucky enough, you ought to be able to retire. You ought to be able to do it with some dignity. You ought to be able to retire in that same home where you raised your kids. I think that every single American deserves that, and I'm willing to fight for that no matter who's in the way. Right now, the person in the way is named Donald Trump. Very soon, they'll find somebody else with the same bad hair and the same bad ideas, and we'll fight them too. And let us not forget in this moment where our power to fight and win comes from. Our country, our founding documents, with all of their great flaws, changed the course of human history. That Constitution, sweated over, tarried over, in Philadelphia started with 3 simple words that you all know, but that too many people in power forget. It starts with we the people.
That's right.
Not they the billionaires.
Right.
Not them the corporations. And even though I am one, it didn't start with them the politicians. It started with we the people. This nation was founded on a pretty radical idea at the time that we could govern ourselves. That free men and women could decide for ourselves what our future would be. We had a radical idea as Americans that we were not going to bow to a king. Americans believed that hundreds of years ago, and I will tell you, I'm not bowing to a king now. I'm not bending the knee. I'm not kissing the ring. Certainly not to a guy with a spray tan like Donald Trump. So here is where we are. Here is where we are. We are in a moment that requires us, as I have said throughout this evening, to remember that we exist along a continuum. I'm lucky enough that my grandmother lives here in South Carolina. And I've been saying to your chair, she keep asking, when y'all gonna do an event in Greer? Because that's when I'll come. She does what she wants to do. She has earned it because she was, like so many in this room, a warrior of the civil rights movement. Stood up, organized, because she wanted to raise a kid and hopefully have grandkids in a world that was much different than the one that she grew up in, with poll taxes. Young girls whose ideas of what their future could be was limited, particularly if you were a young black girl. And I'll never forget this tough warrior, veteran of the civil rights movement, calling me the last time this joker got in the White House. I was on the House floor, and some of you may know Republicans don't like me on the House floor. They usually try to kick me off the House floor. And she called me one day, and I could hear this tough warrior woman clearly had some tears in her eyes. And she said to me, "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought my generation had fixed some of this stuff. And here you are, fighting the same exact battles that I thought we had won." But I said to her what I have been saying all across this country: it's just our turn.
Right.
It's just our turn. We don't get to get out of the continuum of the relay race because somebody did their lap. It's just our turn. It is just our turn to pick up this baton. That refrain is carrying me in this moment? Who are we to think that the battle for justice and freedom was just somebody else's job? It's our turn to do it. Who are we to think that we just get to abdicate our responsibility to this great inheritance? It's just our turn, my friends. This moment of choosing for each and every one of us, this moment we get to choose whether or not we're going to actually pick love over hate, freedom over fear. We get to actually decide together. So they want to ban our books. They want to ban our history. They want us demoralized. They want us divided. They particularly want us divided as Democrats. Now, some of you may watch this show. It's a sci-fi show called Silo on HBO. Now, I don't watch Silo. I listen to Silo as my husband watches Silo. And if I want to stay in the living room, I got to listen to Silo. That's how it goes. Now, I was listening to Silo one day, and one of the main characters said something that I've been saying ever since. We have to figure out how to be angry with each other and not at each other. We have to figure out how to be angry with each other and not at each other. Because it's easy to look to the person that's right by your side and say, we would have won that election if you just had done more. It's easy to point at a couple of elected leaders and say, you're the reason we lost. But I would remind folks that the Democratic Party is not just 9 people that were elected in National Harbor. You are the Democratic Party. You are the Democratic Party. And we are the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of fighters. We are the heirs of this great promise of democracy. And we won't stand back. We won't stand by. I hope, Democrats, that we stand up. That we stand up for our values. That we stand up for our neighbors. That we stand up for truth. That we stand up for justice. That we stand up for common sense. And if we do, if we stand up, if we do our work, then we'll leave something for the next generation. Something worth fighting for. Something worth building on. Something that we know we saved in a moment when democracy needed saving. Now, I will end with this thought and with the choice and decision that we all have to make collectively and individually. You know, democracy is frustrating because it is the one group project that you cannot get out of. Now, some of you chuckling was the person in the group project that we was pissed at. You did not do that PowerPoint. You did not help. And showed up at the presentation. But here's the truth. We're going to decide in the next couple of months whether or not we're going to let democracy die on our watch. I refuse to let democracy die on our watch. I refuse. And so what does that mean? That means we're contesting every single election up and down the ballot. That means that we're treating school board with the same seriousness that we treat U.S. Senate. That means that we're treating county commissioners with the same seriousness we treat elections to Congress. That means that we're registering people to vote with the same engagement that we're retweeting our favorite politician. That means that we are doing the work that has been laid before us. God bless you, and let's go win the future, my friends. Let's go win the future.
For those of you on the week go to church today, you just got a sermon. And you know when you get a good sermon, the preacher tells